The complex and deeply significant political and economic friction that has erupted between the American retail behemoth Walmart and the Trump administration has become an inescapable and defining conflict of the new tariff era. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. What initially appeared to be a standard, routine corporate financial disclosure has, with remarkable speed, spiraled into a high-stakes and intensely visible public relations and political battle. This confrontation has laid bare the profound tensions and disagreements that exist between the implementation of sweeping government policy and the harsh, unyielding realities of corporate operations and market economics. At the very core of this dispute lies a fundamental, almost philosophical, disagreement over a crucial question: who should ultimately be forced to bear the substantial financial burden of these new and aggressive trade taxes? The corporations that import goods, or as the administration insists, the American consumer? The answer to this question has profound implications for the national economy, business strategy, and household budgets across the country. The initial spark that ignited this firestorm of controversy was a recent quarterly earnings call where Walmart's president and CEO, Doug McMillon, addressed the company's strategic plans in the face of these new and substantial tariffs. McMillon, a central and highly respected figure in the American business landscape, stated his position with a clear, matter-of-fact tone, making it unequivocally clear that while Walmart's long-standing and cherished mission is to provide everyday low prices for its customers, the sheer magnitude and scope of these new tariffs were simply too immense and financially crippling for the company to absorb entirely. He explained that this was not a defiant act or a refusal to cooperate, but rather a sober and unavoidable economic reality, given the company's famously thin retail profit margins. He further elaborated that even with the recently negotiated and lowered tariffs on China, the company would still be forced to pass on a significant portion of these costs to its customers. This was an inevitable move that would translate into higher prices on a vast and diverse array of consumer goods, from electronics to household staples. This was a candid and pragmatic assessment of a challenging economic situation, rooted in the company's fundamental fiduciary duty to its shareholders, employees, and customers to remain a viable and profitable enterprise. The president's reaction to this statement was both immediate and intensely forceful, delivered with his characteristic populist fervor. In a flurry of posts on his personal Truth social network, he publicly and vociferously lambasted Walmart for its position, issuing a direct and unambiguous demand that the company eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. He framed the entire issue in starkly populist terms, painting the company as a greedy villain that was prioritizing its own massive profits over the financial well-being and daily struggles of hard-working American families. This public pressure campaign was a transparent attempt to leverage the immense power and bully pulpit of the presidency to directly influence a private corporation's fundamental pricing strategy. This created a powerful and highly visible conflict between the public and private sectors, with the administration attempting to dictate economic reality through sheer political will, a strategy that many observers found to be both unprecedented and deeply problematic for the functioning of a free market economy. The president's rhetoric suggested a direct link between corporate responsibility and patriotism, further complicating the issue for a public trying to understand the economic realities. The situation was further complicated and muddied by the public statements of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. In a high-profile appearance on NBC's Meet the Press, Bessent claimed to have had a personal and productive phone call with McMillon that had resulted in a promise from Walmart to eat some of the tariffs, much in the same way the company had done during previous, less significant trade disputes. This was presented by Bessent and the administration as a major victory for their hardline stance, a clear signal that their pressure campaign was working and that corporations were falling in line. However, Bessent's account was immediately and forcefully challenged by sources close to Walmart. While the company itself, in a strategic move to avoid a direct and public confrontation with the administration, declined to comment on private conversations with government officials. A source familiar with the call revealed that it was a pre-scheduled dialogue and that Walmart's public position, that it could not possibly fully absorb the costs, had not changed in the slightest. This created a significant public relations and political spectacle, with Besson's claims of a corporate capitulation being directly contradicted by the company's own actions and statements. This left the public to navigate two completely different and competing narratives, forcing them to question the credibility of both the administration's claims and the retail giant's business rationale. Walmart's chief financial officer, John Rainey, had previously offered a more detailed, specific, and sobering analysis of the economic situation. In a candid interview with CNBC, he reiterated with stark clarity that the new tariffs were more than any retailer can absorb, and that, despite the company's best and most creative efforts to mitigate the impact, price increases were not just a possibility, but an absolute certainty. He provided a specific and worrying timeline, warning the American public that consumers would begin to see these higher prices on store shelves by late May, with more widespread and significant increases expected to hit by June. Rainey also pointed out that while the company was highly experienced in dealing with incremental and predictable price increases, the sudden, substantial, and punitive nature of the new tariffs, with some rates set at a staggering and unheard of 145%, represented a completely unprecedented and unique challenge for the entire retail industry. This level of transparency and detail from Walmart stood in stark and profound contrast to the administration's often overly optimistic, vague, and unsubstantiated assurances about the tariffs' ultimate impact on the American economy, further highlighting the deep and growing chasm between political rhetoric and economic reality. These tariffs were a central and key element of the president's new trade policy, which he proudly launched on April 2nd, a day he grandly dubbed Liberation Day. The policy was a sweeping, ambitious, and unilateral plan that applied tariffs to imports from dozens of countries around the world, including many close U.S. allies and vital trade partners. The president justified this aggressive policy by arguing that the U.S. had been economically exploited for decades by its trading partners and that these tariffs were a necessary, decisive, and long overdue step to restore national sovereignty and ensure a greater degree of economic fairness for American workers and businesses. However, this aggressive and protectionist approach was met with widespread and severe criticism from a broad range of economists and policy experts who issued dire and prescient warnings that the policy would inevitably lead to a global trade war, disrupt complex and fragile international supply chains, and, in the end, cause significant and lasting harm to the very American consumers the president claimed to be protecting. The initial weeks of the policy quickly proved these warnings to be chillingly accurate, with widespread economic turmoil, including a declining stock market, slowing economic growth, and the very consumer price hikes that Walmart had warned about all along. In a significant and surprising policy reversal, the administration announced a 90-day pause in its burgeoning trade war with China, a move that was immediately seen by analysts as a major de-escalation and a significant step back from its initial aggressive stance. The tariff rate on Chinese goods was reduced from a staggering 145% to a more manageable 30%, a move that some analysts cynically referred to as Capitulation Day, a direct counterpoint to the president's earlier Liberation Day claim. The White House, in an effort to control the narrative, attempted to frame this as a total reset in trade relations with China, a move toward a new and more productive relationship. This was quickly followed by another major policy shift, where the administration clarified that it would not be able to negotiate with all the countries on its initial list, acknowledging the immense logistical and diplomatic challenges. Instead, it would focus its efforts on its 18 most important trading relationships and unilaterally impose new tariff rates on just those countries. Besant later appeared again to explain that the new strategy was to pursue a series of regional deals rather than the broad, global approach initially announced, thereby finally acknowledging the impracticality and unworkability of the initial, all-encompassing plan. This ongoing, ever-changing saga is a powerful and revealing illustration of the profound and often painful disconnect between ambitious political rhetoric and the unyielding realities of economic principles, and the complex, unpredictable, and far-reaching consequences that inevitably result when the two collide in a public arena.